Welcome to our podcast, Disability Warriors, The Download, powered by Liner Legal, your disability warriors, fighting for dignity, justice, and the benefits that you deserve. Each episode, we bring you powerful stories, real legal insight, and everything you need to feel informed, supported, and never alone. Whether you are navigating the complex disability process yourself, supporting a loved one, or just want to understand the system a little better, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit follow now so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to take the next step, head to our website at linerlegal.com to schedule your free case review.
Because your voice matters.
Your fight matters.
And we're with you every step of the way. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Disability Download. I am so excited to be back with you. It's been a little while since we've recorded one of these, but I missed all you, my raving fans, and we decided to come back because I have a guest who I've actually had conversations with in the past on a different platform, but it was such a meaningful and helpful conversation that I think touched so many people that I wanted to bring her to the Liner Legal Social Security Disability community. So please welcome Amber Carter. Amber is the board chair of the Interstitial Cystitis Association. And I don't want to steal all your thunder and give your bio, even though, there's a lot to tell. That's why. But what makes Amber so interesting is she blends several different worlds. One, professionally, she came from a legal background. Two, she lives with interstitial cystitis. We'll call it IC to make it easier for all the listeners and ourselves. Let's be realistic. When they were naming IC, they weren't trying to help people roll it off the tongue. Interstitial cystitis. That is really freaking hard to say. And also, and I know that this is the first conversation where you're volunteering that you're going to open up to talking about it a little more. Amber, congratulations, by the way, was recently approved for Social Security disability herself after a long and protracted fight. So, Amber, I've said a lot about you. Why don't you, just introduce yourself a little bit, and then I want to tell people a little bit about IC.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, so much. You covered a lot. I'm just incredibly excited to be here with you and to be able to speak about something that, I've been very passionate about and that I've spent a lot of time advocating about for disability for IC. And like you said, I finally won. It took almost 5 years, but finally it did happen. So I'm extremely grateful for that. And I am more than open to share my experience with all of you. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to the ICA. I will, answer whatever questions that legally I can. I do come from a legal background. I live in Central Florida and graduated from University of Central Florida with a pre-law legal studies degree. And I had a desire to go to law school and practice contract law for entertainment law. And unfortunately, IC kind of happened between when I graduated and when I could do that. So I ended up being a paralegal for the city of Orlando, which was amazing. And I loved my career. But unfortunately, 15 years later, my IC became very severe and I got to the point where I had to give up my career. So I think I kind of have a little bit of an expertise when it comes to saying, hey, I have a legal background. I know what kind of the legalese is. And for me, going through the disability process was insanely difficult. And I'm like, gosh, as having a legal background, what happens to the people that don't? So that's something that I'm so excited to have a conversation with Michael about. And again, thank you for being here.
No, it's my pleasure. And I think it feels like an appropriate time to educate people a little bit, because I will tell you, until I was a disability lawyer, and probably you until you were diagnosed, you probably didn't know what IC was.
Yeah.
And IC, as I mentioned earlier, stands for interstitial cystitis. It's characterized by chronic bladder and pelvic pain. It causes urgency and frequency, which, let's just translate. It means you're going to the bathroom a lot and you're in pain.
Yep.
You're in bladder pain. It is not an infection. There's no antibiotic that you can take. And unfortunately, and I think this is going to play a big role in our conversation about why it took you 5 years, right? It took you 5 years to get approved for a Social Security disability. There's the only way that they diagnose it isn't like, oh, they send you for a blood test, or, oh, they do a CAT scan of your bladder. Doesn't work that way. They have to rule everything else out. And when they've ruled out every other cause for those symptoms, that's when they say that you have IC. There's no single test. And it's a rarer impairment, but it's not rare. There's about 1 million Americans who have IC, mostly women. But at the same time, it's also underdiagnosed in men. There's many men who have it and don't realize that that's what the cause of their symptoms are, because it can look a lot like chronic prostatitis, which, when the symptoms mimic each other, a lot of times they diagnose people incorrectly. And interestingly, what I found out is that about 70% of IC patients, they face what the federal government calls a diagnostic delay, meaning the amount of time that it takes to actually be properly diagnosed is significantly longer than, the typical trail from somebody experiencing symptoms until they know what's going on. The problem with that, amongst others, is when it takes so much longer to figure out exactly what's wrong, and hopefully they're treating people symptomatically along the way, but when it takes you so much longer to get there, oftentimes people have decompensated. Their symptoms have only gotten worse, which makes it even harder for the doctors to treat them by the time they finally really know what's going on. IC has some friends in that, and I'm sure you can maybe talk a little bit about this, both in your experience with the ICA, Amber, but also maybe even your own experience. IC very commonly goes along with some other chronic pain conditions like fibromyalgia, IBS, and even more so, to kind of play into your own story, one of the reasons why it is so hard for people with IC to get approved for Social Security disability is that Social Security doesn't have a listing for it. So, Social Security maintains, it used to physically be a book. Now I think it's just a website, which lists out all of the different health problems that people have. And it says, here's what the criteria are. If you meet these 7 things, you're disabled. IC is not in the list. Now, Social Security did come up with what they call an SSR, a Social Security regulation that tells judges or adjudicators how to consider it. But with this long diagnostic trail, without a listing, very often people suffer in silence and without benefits before they get the help that they need. Right. And that was a lot of talking, Amber.
No. Everything you said was on point.
If my voice didn't sound so much like a hummingbird, I think people would object more when I go on these rants. But because, it's like, it's like listening to seal sing. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think you should do audiobooks, maybe like on the side.
If I was able to focus or concentrate on things for longer, I think I would. Like, that would be great. That would be
Sometimes
great.
I listen to audiobooks and they start and I'm like, oh, I can't listen to that voice, but I could listen to this. So
yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely echo everything that you said. Yes, personally, aside from IC, I have rheumatoid arthritis, as well as fibromyalgia, severe TMJ pain, migraines, kind of the full gambit of the issues and the comorbidities that happen with IC. And from my perspective, what I experienced going through the Social Security process was that you absolutely have to make sure, like you said, because it's not a listing. So you have to make sure that you're encompassing all of these other issues that you're experiencing and all of these other pain conditions that you're experiencing aside from the interstitial cystitis. Because unfortunately, and I don't blame the judges. They hear interstitial cystitis and they're like, "Oh, I don't know what that is." So you kind of have to almost relate to them a little bit more when it comes to the other comorbidities that you're dealing with as a patient. So, one thing that I definitely noticed going through the process was, and I see patients can relate to this as well, but you have to kind of choose like, hey, what is the largest condition that's bothering me that I'm dealing with? And for me, it was the IC. Then yes, there are these, secondary comorbidities like RA, fibromyalgia, all these other things, but I personally can't tolerate those medications with the IC.
It's a catch-22.
Exactly. So those are the things that you have to make sure that, at least for me, that I was expressing to Social Security that, hey, I tried these things, but because of this other condition, I personally could not tolerate them.
Yeah.
Even trying.
Because I want people to understand that they're not alone. Okay.
Yes.
And that there is this long trail here. You were diagnosed with IC, actually diagnosed in 2005, right?
Yes.
Does that sound right?
Correct.
When did you start experiencing symptoms? When did you start to realize something's not right?
Gosh, probably about 2 years before that.
Okay. Well, I want to kind of break this down into chunks. So 2 years, something's wrong. They haven't diagnosed you. What was that like for you? In terms of doctors and mentally, how that feels?
Gosh, I was very young, at the time I was.
You must have been like 4 years old.
Yeah, right? That's what it feels like, right? I had just graduated college and then sort of the symptoms started and I was like, gosh, what is this? And, I kept telling my mom, it's like, gosh, I have this feeling like I have a UTI. And of course, like a good mother, I'll go to the urgent care. So I would go and then, of course, everything would come back, no infection, no issues, and nobody had any suggestions. So at that point, I was probably, maybe around 22. And finally, I got so frustrated. I went into an urgent care and just completely was like hysterical, just crying.
Sure.
I'm in so much pain, I don't know what to do. And I ended up getting a really great doctor at that appointment. And he said, hey, I know this lady that's down south in South Florida. Why don't you go see her, urologist? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I ended up going to see her. And she did the cystoscopy, hydrodistension, as well as a biopsy. And it came back as, mast cell interstitial cystitis. So, okay, then I had the diagnosis. But the problem with that was once that came back, she said, I don't know how to help you. Okay. So I go back to Central Florida and the Orlando area thinking, okay, no big deal. I'll just find somebody here that will help me. And I could not. So I ended up finding a specialist in Texas who still treats me now.
Wow.
But there was probably about a 4-year period where I was looking for a urologist that actually understood IC and how to treat it. And I had just been to urologists, gynecologists, primary care, and the only thing they wanted to do was just, throw antidepressants, opioids, kind of the deal with the pain, and tell me that I was depressed, which I wasn't. I was 23 years old. I was in a great place in my life. So actually being able to finally find a urologist that understood what IC was huge for me.
So in addition to being the board chair of ICA, and in a few minutes, I'll let you tell us a little bit about ICA, but in addition to being the board chair, you run a support group, right?
Yes.
And when people come to you in the support group, are there common themes in the things that you're hearing? Are there common questions, common concerns? What are people saying?
Yeah. So I've been running the Central Florida support group for, I don't know, I guess it's going on like 10 years. I feel like, where are the years going? I mean, they're like moving so fast. But after COVID, there sort of was, a change in what the support group kind of looked like. And then we were not meeting in person as much. We tried the virtual thing, that kind of didn't work either. So I've been doing a lot of kind of one-on-one, just talking with patients, seeing how I can support them moving forward, which seems to be working really well. But there absolutely is a common consensus, especially here in Central Florida. We're having a big problem finding urologists that are knowledgeable and capable. And living here, especially living here since I've been diagnosed for the last probably 20 years, I have been through probably every urologist that's in the local area. And some of them are, incredibly kind, but they just nicely tell you, hey, I don't know what else I can do for you. I have had urologists tell me, hey, I do Botox, but I will not do it the way that your current physician is doing it. So I have also had my urologist say, hey, I'll come to Florida. I'll train your physician or whoever you think would be, knowledgeable enough to learn about the procedure. And literally the physicians just say no. They're not interested in learning about IC or learning about the treatment options for IC. And what I do is not the same as what other patients do. And that's okay.
And you're talking right now about doctors, the medical community.
Yeah.
Urologists, people who specialize in the bladder region. And they don't know about it. They don't know how to treat it. And they just kind of push you to the side.
Yeah. They're not interested in learning about it or learning about the treatment options, which is very discouraging.
And you and I kind of started on this path, or we at least mentioned it, but in the world that I live in, which is trying to help people get approved for Social Security disability benefits, there's this weird struggle that people have internally a lot, where you can't work, right? So Amber, you applied for disability benefits. I don't know if you applied right away, but argue like back in 2021, is that actually when you filed your application?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You knew you couldn't work. Okay. You were a professional. You had gone through doctors and doctors and doctors. The answers that they were giving you weren't enough for you to be able to maintain full-time competitive employment, which is what led you to applying. Am I saying any, I wasn't your lawyer, but am I saying anything incorrectly so far?
No, you're on point.
So you apply for this benefit from the government, which, by the way, you've been paying into.
Correct.
Right? Because you paid plenty of taxes when you could work. And then all of a sudden they say, you're not disabled.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
You know, in a way I kind of expected it. Just because of the things that I had read and from what I had learned, but it did feel really disrespectful. You know, I come from a family who's, you know, many, many decades of Air Force, military, and, you know,
Put your head down and work hard.
Exactly. And like you said, I felt like, you know, I had done my time. I mean, I literally went as long as I could until the point as a paralegal where a judge was like, why is she constantly getting up in a trial? Which I'm sure you understand.
Sure.
It's kind of embarrassing. Not just to me, but, you know, to the team that I'm supporting. So to hear them initially say that I was not disabled was devastating. But I knew, you know, and my husband and I spoke about it and we said, hey, you know what? We're going to go after this. And this is something that's really important and something that I can use as advocacy. And we planned for it, you know, and I spoke with my surgeon and, you know, he came to me one day after post-op and he said, you're in a bad place. You know, we need to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what spawned me stopping working. I knew it was time.
So I want people to hear what, and I mentioned them a little bit, and you kind of hinted at it in the example that you gave where, you know, you're, just so everybody knows, you're describing yourself working as a paralegal and in the middle of a trial, supporting trial attorneys. You've got to, you know, take a work break. Tell us how IC was affecting you at work and how, you know, so that other people realize that they're not alone in this.
Sure. You know, I mean, it would be like small things. I'd find myself, you know, even when we weren't in trial, I would constantly be leaving my desk to use the restroom. I would find myself realizing that I was losing concentration when it came to the medications that I was on.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep at night. You know, I would be getting up probably 6 to 8 times a night to use the bathroom, which, of course, anybody that knows about sleep and REM, you can't ever get there. So I was constantly exhausted. And I feel like this is embarrassing, but it's insanely honest. I would go on my lunch break, that 1 hour lunch break that I would have, and I would sleep in my car in the parking garage just to be able to take a nap and try to recharge for the second half of the day. And it obviously never really worked very well. But once those things started happening, I was like, I can't do this. And one time I actually fell asleep in the bathroom. I'd fallen asleep at my desk. So all of those things, when I kind of started looking at them as a whole and still being very young, I was like, this is not normal. I can't do this. And it's not fair to my employer. And I loved my job. It was devastating for me to give up what I love to do and what I went to school to learn. But it was the right thing to do. And I do want the other patients to understand that you're not alone. Absolutely. And I've been there and I've experienced it.
I want to drop in here some of the disability perspective.
Sure.
Because you're not alone, just like the people who are listening to this aren't alone. This is a common story. But how do you give yourself the best chance of being approved for disability benefits given what you're going through? So I want to shed some light on that. If you are working and you're struggling, now is the time for you to start documenting things. Okay. Keep scheduling follow-up visits with your doctors, but not just for the sake of going through the motions, for the sake of using it as an opportunity to almost, truly document your symptoms. Make sure at every single doctor's visit you have, you're telling them how frequently you're using the bathroom. You can say it in terms of a number of times per day, number of times per hour. Describe the pain that you're having, where you're experiencing pain. But even more important than just loosely describing pain, describe how it's limiting you. I was in pain so bad that there were 3 days straight last week where I couldn't get out of bed, doctor. About half of the week, my spouse has to prepare meals, do laundry, do the grocery shopping because I can't do those things reliably myself. All of my daily activities, doctor, take 3 times as long as they used to. I'm always stopping, running to the bathroom, stopping so I can, try and catch myself up from the fatigue that I'm feeling that Amber was talking about a minute ago. But far too often, people are just reporting these things to the judge at a hearing or on the forms that Social Security sends to fill out. And they're not working it into the day-to-day, and you're not talking to your doctor every day, but in the routine conversations that you're having with your care team. Start now. Because if you wait until you can't work anymore, and that's when you decide you're going to start documenting things, you're in trouble. You are setting yourself up for a long course ahead of you. Amber, have there been any, you mentioned one, you talked about Botox. Have there been treatments that have worked for you? What have you heard might work for other patients that are out there?
I see patients are so unique and none of us are the same. And, some of us struggle from more pelvic floor symptoms. And some of us struggle from more bladder-centric, like diseased bladder symptoms. Yeah. So those are kind of 2 very different things, but they both kind of equalize in their own respect. So I personally am one that suffers from the bladder-centric condition. And with that, of course, comes a little bit of the pelvic floor dysfunction as well. But I have tried kind of everything that was on the market. I mean, when I was first diagnosed, I went through pelvic floor therapy. I did the only FDA approved medication for ICU, which is Elmeron. I did that. But unfortunately, I could not handle the side effects. I got bad headaches from it. I did installations, bladder installations, pain relieving type things of heparin, lidocaine, those types of things. And then I hit a point where my physician said, hey, don't know what to do. Here's a bunch of opioids. Let's hope that gets you through. And I mean, yeah, maybe it numbed the pain a little bit, but I couldn't function. So I just decided, hey, I'm going to start Googling physicians that specialize in IC. And I ended up finding the Botox. And when I kind of started reading about it and learning about it, I thought, well, that kind of makes sense for what my specific phenotype was for IC. So that's when I decided to kind of give that a try.
But it's a lot of trial and error, just like it's
absolutely a
difficult road to getting there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tell us about ICA. What is it? How can it help people that are listening to us?
Sure. So the ICA currently is the largest nonprofit for interstitial cystitis, and we focus our efforts on advocacy and fundraising and evidence-based information. And with IC, what we have noticed is that there are a lot of supplements. There's a lot of, kind of vitamin type things that are on the market to try to help with the symptoms. Whether they work or not, I'm not entirely sure. But we try to make sure that anything we talk about or attempt to suggest to any patients is something that we actually have some evidence-based information for. And currently, right now, there are not a lot of treatments that are FDA approved for IC. Obviously, the Botox, like I spoke about before, the Almiron, pelvic floor therapy. So we have a long way to go if those are kind of the only options that our patients have.
Sure.
And a lot of these, supplements, they're not harmful. We just don't have any science-backed evidence that they work. So, every year we go to DC and we talk to, our local representatives for each state and see what we can do. And within the last year, we actually were able to double our budget for interstitial cystitis with the congressional budget, which was a huge win for us. So we're super excited about that. We'll be going back the beginning of next year as well. And that's something that we take a lot of pride in.
So Congress sets aside money every year for, what is this, research or awareness?
Correct.
What does that money go towards?
Yes. So it goes towards the research, education, advocacy. A lot of it also goes towards like the Department of Defense or Department of War. I don't really know what we're calling it right now. But it all goes towards basically research into our disease. And we have also noticed that there are a lot of military members that seem to have developed IC through PTSD. So that's something that we can kind of relate to Department of Defense with kind of encouraging that research for our military service people.
That's an interesting link, something that might not be obvious to people, that it's linked to being in the service. But I mean, let me ask you about that a little bit. Does the fact that it's now being linked to something that's affecting veterans in greater numbers, does that give people hope that maybe it'll start to get more attention in terms of the research and understanding and hopefully treatments that are more effective?
Yeah, I mean, we're hopeful, but I wish we had a solid answer as to what causes IC, and of course we don't.
Yeah.
So there's so many theories out there. It could be an allergic reaction. It could be something, a medication, or a potential vaccine. It could be a stress-induced event that happened, and we just don't know. So that's where I would love to see a lot of the research actually happen, is to how did this actually occur in the patients?
I want to ask you sort of a wrap-up question, which goes back to maybe your experience leading a support group, right? So what would you want someone who feels, unheard, in pain, struggling, they're told it's all in their head? Did you ever hear that? Did anybody ever say it's in your head?
Absolutely.
What would you want them to take away from this?
I think the main thing that I've learned after being a patient for almost 20 years is that you know your own body and you are your own best advocate. I mean, I have been told crazy things, and you have to let that go. And if you go to a physician and it doesn't sound right, then it's probably not right. So advocate for yourself, find somebody else.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Amber, it's great catching up with you. I really appreciate you sharing so much of your own story, telling everybody about the ICA, and just really like we're talking about, giving people an opportunity to realize that this affects a lot of people. Like I said, over 1 million Americans have interstitial cystitis, but it's not talked about very often. It's often misdiagnosed, and I am really hoping that even if we reached one person here, that this can help. We did a great job.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm so grateful for your advice and everything that you've said as well. I wish I had found you earlier in my disability process. Your experience and your advice is just invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you. And everybody, I look forward to welcoming you next time on the next episode of the Disability Download. Your story matters, and your voice deserves to be heard. Catch you next time on Disability Warriors The Download, where we fight for dignity, justice, and the benefits that you deserve.